I'm sorry, are we doing this here? I asked, barely above a whisper as the HR rep read from a goddamn script. Open plan floor. My entire department watching. A few interns awkwardly chewing on their bagels. The VP of strategy leaned back in his chair like he was watching the trailers before a Marvel movie. And then came those two words corporate loves to gut you with when they want blood, but not a lawsuit. At will. No misconduct. No explanation. No cause. Just a performance review meeting that turned into a public ejection. The CEO, Gregory with his $12 haircut and wet handshake, didn't even make eye contact. He glanced at his watch, then nodded like he was swatting a fly. I caught sight of my reflection in the glass, blazer, heels, not a hair out of place, and wondered if this is what they meant by executive presence. Because apparently, mine was no longer required. I stood up slowly. No tears, no pleading. Just a woman who'd given 12 years of her life to a company that didn't have the spine to fire her behind closed doors. My fingers unclipped the badge from my belt loop. It made a small plastic clink as I dropped it on the glass table. Then I reached into my satchel, leather, worn, reliable, and pulled out a thick white envelope with a gold seal. No label, no return address. Just heavy paper and heavier silence. I set it in front of Gregory. He didn't even glance at it. He was already turning to ask someone about the Q3 metrics. "This is all I have left," I said. But I wasn't talking about the badge. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. 97% of people hear these stories and never hit that button. It's free, and it seriously keeps this thing alive. A like helps more than you think, too. Thanks for riding along. Back to the moment, I walked to my desk, past startled faces, a few fake concerned coworkers who suddenly found their keyboards fascinating, and grabbed the only things I cared about. A framed photo of my dog, a silver pen Anna had gifted me, and a manila folder I always kept locked in my bottom drawer. I didn't say goodbye. That wasn't silence. That was a promise. As I rode down in the elevator, one hand on the folder, I stared straight ahead and thought only this. They don't even know what they've just lost. Because that envelope? It wasn't a farewell. It was a fuse. I disappeared like a system ghost. No out-of-office reply, no dramatic exit email, no thanks for the memories, LinkedIn post with a black and white selfie, just gone. No one followed up, no one called, not even the people I used to pull out of quarterly fire drills with their numbers still smeared in dry erase across my brain. 12 years of making their chaos look like strategy, and all it took was a 15-minute ambush and a 2-line HR memo to wipe me from existence. Fine. Let the machine reset. I flew out 2 days later. One-way ticket, Southeast Asia first, then Berlin, then a nowhere town outside of Lisbon where the wind could scream through the windows and nobody expected me to reply to a Slack message. I started consulting under an alias. Low-profile projects, offshore, secure, the kind of gigs where you're paid to be invisible. And I got really, really good at it. But wherever I went, I carried 2 things, the pen Anna gave me and the folder labeled AMH Holdings. Anna. God, if they knew who she really was. I met her on a Tuesday, new admin, looked maybe 20, barely taller than the office ficus, hair pulled back like she was hoping not to be seen, but she was sharp, scary sharp. The kind of sharp you only catch if you're watching her hands instead of her mouth. And I watched. She handled the investor prep like someone who'd seen 100 pitch decks, not someone printing them for the first time. Knew where the founder kept his red-stamped originals, corrected one of the SVP's math errors on a financial doc, in pencil, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be right. Most people walked past her like she was furniture. The interns called her Anna Banana when they thought she couldn't hear. One VP even snapped at her in the break room for using the last oat milk creamer. "You're just support," he said. I stood behind him in line and didn't say a word, just memorized the back of his head. What they never understood was that Anna wasn't just support. She was the firewall behind the system, a fail-safe with a pulse. There were moments, small ones, where the mask slipped. When she quietly adjusted the founder's notes before a board call. When I spotted her texting from a phone that wasn't her work number. Once, I caught her in the server room after hours, saying she was just helping it. Except IT had gone home. We never spoke about it directly, but we understood each other. I'd cover when she needed to leave early for a call that was definitely not with her dentist. She'd quietly reroute vendor contracts so they didn't hit the CFO's desk until after I reviewed them. Mutual ghosting, mutual protection. And then one night, maybe a year before the firing, I found her in the parking garage, just standing by her car, eyes red. She handed me an envelope, said nothing, just nodded once and drove off. Inside, a copy of a birth certificate, a notarized guardianship clause, and a trust document with one phrase highlighted: "Control reverts to the successor upon her 28th birthday." The successor's name? Anna M.H. Her last name wasn't on her badge, not on her HR file, not in the system. But I knew the founder's signature when I saw it. And suddenly, every late-night shift, every silent correction, every half-smile when the execs mocked her made sense. She wasn't just some assistant. She was the founder's daughter, and I wasn't just fired. I was erased before I could help her finish the transfer. Until now. In a rented apartment overlooking a sleepy street in Lisbon, I opened the file folder. Inside were copies of everything Anna had given me. Contracts, clauses, the original envelope's twin. I laid it out on the desk, took a deep breath and whispered, "Time to update the terms." They called it their golden era. Stock climbed, the press swooned, and a new banner went up outside headquarters. Innovation. Ownership. Legacy. I nearly choked when I saw the pictures online. That building was held together with duct tape and displaced loyalty the entire time I was there. Now suddenly it was a cathedral of executive brilliance. And my name? Erased like a coffee stain on a glass table. 3 major product launches, my roadmaps, my vendor network, my process frameworks, and not a single mention of me in any press release. The CFO was now a keynote speaker at fintech panels, recycling the same budget strategy I'd built during the 2018 crash. One of the junior analysts I mentored got a LinkedIn post from the CEO congratulating him on pioneering our resource optimization model. I wrote that model in a hospital room while my father was dying. But sure, let's give it to Jason with his borrowed suit and Red Bull breath. And Gregory? He strutted around conferences like he'd carved the company out of granite with his own 2 hands. I watched one of his keynote speeches from my hotel room in Prague. He stood in front of a giant LED screen that read, "From Garage to Greatness," and smirked. We built this from scratch. Nothing was handed to us. Bullshit. He was handed everything, especially the silence. Meanwhile, I sat at a table in a shared workspace above a bookstore, quietly reviewing the amended trust documents Anna had forwarded through a secure channel. She'd turned 28. No fanfare, no big announcement. Just a time-stamped email with a subject line that read, "I'm ready now." She'd been living off-grid since I left. Changed cities, changed hair color. Let the company believe she'd moved on, that she was just another assistant who flamed out. But she hadn't vanished. She was watching, studying, learning what power looked like in the wrong hands. We'd kept contact to an absolute minimum. Burner accounts, scheduled pings, no calls unless pre-cleared. I had eyes on the board, she had ears on the shareholders. And now, the clock had ticked over. She was legal, fully vested. The clause we'd held onto like a loaded weapon, buried deep in the founder's trust, was now active. I arranged a notary meeting in a dusty office in Brussels. Nothing glamorous. Fluorescent lighting, a squeaky chair, a coffee machine that hadn't worked since the Eurocup. But the notary? Swiss, discreet, terrifyingly precise. Anna sat across from me, hoodie pulled over her curls, signature steady. I watched her slide the papers forward, no hesitation. The notary adjusted his glasses, confirmed the documents against the originals, and asked one final time. "You understand the authority you're assuming under this clause?" She nodded once. He dipped the seal in ink. Stamped. Successor authority activated. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Let them keep climbing. We'll see how far they fall." It started as a footnote. Buried halfway through a routine compliance review, the internal audit team flagged an odd clause in the legacy trust documentation. Paragraph 14B, page 86. All material acquisitions, mergers, or corporate transitions are subject to approval by the named successor upon maturity. The auditor squinted. Successor? What successor? Legal shrugged. Probably expired. Boilerplate founder stuff. We'll redline it later. No one thought to look deeper. No one ever does until the house starts to creak. They were too busy polishing the company for the acquisition window. Scrubbing bad press, fluffing investor decks, repackaging their entire origin story like it hadn't been assembled out of duct tape, caffeine, and people like me. Like Anna. There were whispers of an IPO before the buyer emerged, one of the largest conglomerates in the sector. $500 million valuation if everything cleared. The CEO was already pre-spending the bonus in his head, judging by the new Porsche outside HQ. Somewhere on the 17th floor, behind a locked file cabinet in the executive suite, sat the envelope. Still sealed, still untouched, still waiting. It was mentioned once in a transition checklist. Some underpaid legal coordinator raised a hand and asked, "There's an unfiled envelope tagged as original founder correspondence. Do we need that?" The CFO laughed. "Is it notarized?" "Yeah." "Then it's either a resignation letter or someone's revenge fantasy. Skip it." So they did. And for a while, it worked. The deal looked airtight. Due diligence humming. Lawyers combing through contracts like ticks through fur. And then, during a leadership alignment meeting, a junior exec piped up while reviewing the org history timeline. "Hey, whatever happened to Anna, the assistant who used to handle the founder's documents?" You'd have thought someone dropped a glass. The room froze. One VP cleared his throat and muttered, "Didn't she quit? Like 5 years ago?" Someone else frowned. I thought she transferred to HR. No, wait, wasn't she laid off during the reorg? No one had an answer, because no one had ever really looked at her. Not then, not now. Meanwhile, 2 time zones away, I was sipping bitter coffee in a co-working lounge when I got the ping. Audit doc. Clause 14B. Screenshot attached. I didn't panic, didn't rush. I just made one call. Anna picked up. No greeting, just silence. Make sure it's still sealed, I said. She exhaled slowly. It is. Good. We didn't need them to open it. Not yet. We just needed them to keep pretending nothing was coming. They toasted with champagne in the war room. Actual bottles. Not the sparkling cider from last year's Culture Reset Summit. No, this was the real thing. Gold foil labels and corporate egos clinking like they'd just discovered fire. A $500 million acquisition offer sat on the projector screen. 500. The number blinked like it had been summoned through divine hustle. Gregory stood at the head of the table, chest puffed, pretending it was modesty and not bloated pride swelling in his gut. We finally made it, one VP said, half laughing, half choking on his shrimp cocktail. They didn't see the problem, yet. Outside that boardroom, the machine had already started humming. Lawyers, real ones now, not the in-house clowns who thought trust clause was a synonym for optional footnote, were crawling through every dusty contract and buried amendment. They weren't just doing a financial sweep. They were checking the company's DNA. And buried in that DNA? Anna. On day 3 of the legal audit, a young paralegal named Yasmin, 23, freshly minted from Columbia, the kind of person who still says, "Yes, sir," without irony, was cataloging archived founder materials when she flagged something strange in the system. There's an envelope here, logged 5 years ago, right before a personnel change. Not labeled, not scanned, just marked Founder Correspondence. She asked the internal legal coordinator if it should be included in the diligence handover. The guy barely looked up. If it's not already digitized, it's probably nothing. But Yasmin wasn't stupid. She marked it anyway. That note showed up 2 days later in the buyer's legal summary packet. Line 73. Unopened physical envelope, notarized, marked confidential. Source, Executive File Archive. That's when the tone shifted. The buyer's lawyers sent a memo. All historical governance materials must be included. Nothing redacted. No exceptions, especially anything tied to founder succession. Gregory didn't even blink. It's probably a love letter or a resignation tantrum from someone who didn't get their bonus, he joked. The execs laughed. Someone mimed lighting a cigar. But outside their glass walls, a storm was starting to form. I was in a quiet loft in Stockholm when I got the alert. A burner inbox lit up. Buyer counsel requesting all original governance documentation. Includes legacy envelopes. I stared at the screen, heart rate steady. Anna's reply was already queued. Let them open it. I sat back in my chair and smiled just a little. The wind was picking up. The war room smelled like fresh ink, old carpet, and the slow panic of people realizing they missed something. The buyer's legal team had commandeered an entire floor of a downtown office tower. A rotating crew of analysts, paralegals, and outside counsel swarmed over whiteboards filled with ownership trees, stock tables, and terms etched in increasingly frantic handwriting. People moved fast, but their eyes were starting to slow. like their brains couldn't catch up to what their hands were uncovering. The envelope sat in the middle of the conference table. Thick white stock. Gold seal unbroken. Dated 5 years prior. Notarized. Handwritten in black ink. To be opened upon significant change in corporate control. Everyone stared at it like it might detonate. Yasmin, the paralegal who'd flagged it, had her arms crossed and a look that said, "Told you so." "Who signed the chain of custody form?" one senior partner asked, voice clipped. "Internal counsel, but they never opened it." A junior attorney cleared his throat. "We've confirmed it's authentic. Original founder seal matches the trust filings. Signature looks consistent." "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. "Open it," said the lead counsel. Flat. Final. A gloved hand broke the seal. The paper inside was cream-colored, thick, the kind that whispers power when it slides across wood. The room hushed as the counsel read silently, lips barely moving, face draining color like someone pulled the plug on his bloodstream. He read it again, then handed it to the buyer's general counsel, who didn't even finish before he let out a low, "Oh no." Then came the words, read aloud, slow, final. "To whom it may concern, in accordance with the original trust and founding governance clause dated March 12th, 1993, this document affirms that all authority related to corporate transition, acquisition, or liquidation is subject to the approval and signature of the named successor." He paused. Everyone leaned forward. Anna M. H., the founder's daughter, the assistant they'd ignored, mocked, forgotten, the intern they never promoted, the ghost who'd been protecting their foundation while they pissed all over it in quarterly earnings calls. He kept reading. "The successor shall retain veto authority over any such transactions, unless otherwise rescinded in writing by the founder or governing trustee, neither of which have occurred. Control reverts to her. Age, 28. Silence. The kind of silence that turns blood to static. She turned 28 last month. No one moved. One of the buyer's execs slowly lowered his pen. Another closed her laptop without touching a single key. No one even breathed. Because the deal, $500 million of back padding, projection models, and champagne-soaked exit dreams, was now legally worthless unless she signed off. And none of them had any idea who she really was, except me. And I was already on my way. The door shut with a soft click, but the sound might as well have been a gunshot. Inside the executive conference suite, the buyer's lead counsel placed the letter on the polished oak table like it was evidence in a criminal trial. He didn't speak at first, just tapped the paper once, then again, deliberate, a lawyer's version of a threat. Gregory leaned forward, still trying to smile, the kind of weak-lipped grin you'd see on someone realizing their parachute was just a backpack. "Okay," he said, dragging out the vowels. "What exactly is this?" The lawyer didn't bother sitting. "Who is Anna M.H.? Gregory blinked. "Anna?" The lawyer nodded once. "Yes, Anna M.H." Gregory's smile twitched. "She was an intern, admin support, I think. Came through one of those university programs. She left years ago." The lawyer didn't react, just slid the notarized letter forward across the table, slow and silent. "Ask him who she really is." Everyone in the room turned, all eyes on Gregory now. His mouth opened, closed, a stammer formed and died on his tongue. His jaw clenched like he was biting a nail. "No, that can't be right. That clause, if it existed, would have expired or been removed." The lawyer remained still. It wasn't, and it didn't. She has controlling authority, and she hasn't signed anything. He turned the letter around so the founder's signature faced them. And she turned 28 last month. Gregory's voice cracked. That's not possible. But he knew it was. Somewhere in the back of his whiskey-fogged mind, in that vault where he'd buried the things he never bothered to understand, he knew. She was there, watching, waiting. Downstairs, the building's revolving glass doors whooshed as I stepped inside. Same marble floors, same sterile lighting, same front desk security guy, though older now, softer around the middle, but still pretending to read the monitors like a TV detective. I gave him a small nod, slid over the visitor badge they'd prepared. He barely glanced at my name. Probably assumed I was legal counsel or a last-minute consultant flown in to save the deal. He had no idea. The elevator ride was slow, glacial. I adjusted my blazer in the reflection, ran a hand over my tie knot. Clean. Simple. No emotion in the eyes. Just precision. The elevator dinged. I stepped out into the executive lobby, where one of the assistants offered a nervous smile, then vanished down the hall like she wanted no part in whatever was about to unfold. I walked calmly to the boardroom doors, the same ones I had been shoved out of 5 years earlier. Then I paused, smoothed my jacket, straightened my tie, and waited. The air inside the boardroom was thick, like it had soaked up every ego, every spreadsheet, every half-truth uttered since the company's first cheap standing desk was installed. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. Gregory flinched when he saw me, just slightly, like a dog hearing a leash snap. Nobody offered a handshake. The buyer's lead counsel nodded once, his face blank as a ledger. "This is Ms. H's representative," he said, voice smooth and final. "He speaks with full authority." I took my seat slowly, sliding a leather folio onto the table. Not a word, not a glance at Gregory. I wanted the silence to rot through his molars. To the right, 2 of the buyer's board members looked curious. The rest? Tight-faced. Like people who just realized they were about to pay a fortune for a house with a cracked foundation. I opened the folio and pulled out 2 stapled contracts, set them down, side by side. "The successor offers 2 paths forward," I said. Calm, not angry, not theatrical, just inevitable. Option 1, halt the acquisition. Full stop. Begin internal restructuring under the authority of Ms. Anna M. H., legal successor, majority rights holder, and chair effective immediately, per the founder's original governance clause. I let that hang. Option 2, proceed with the acquisition, but under revised terms. These include the removal of the current board, a renegotiated valuation reflecting actual net assets, minus misrepresented leadership contributions. I let my eyes flick to Gregory for just a beat. And a $20 million transfer into a restricted trust managed solely by Ms. H for strategic reinvestment as she sees fit. The buyer's GC glanced at the contract. No surprise, he'd already reviewed it, already knew the math was fair, brutal, but fair. Gregory finally broke. "This is blackmail," he barked, palms flat on the table. "She's a nobody. She was a glorified secretary. You're leveraging some dusty clause." "No," the buyer's lawyer interrupted, flat, hard. "We're honoring a governance clause signed by the founder, which you failed to disclose. And she's not a nobody. She's the key. You don't own this company. She does." Gregory's face flushed dark red. He looked at the others, pleading now. We've built this for a decade. You can't just erase all of that. We're not, I said quietly, turning the second contract around for his view. We're rewriting it. That's the offer. He opened his mouth again. We don't do business with ghosts, the buyer's lead counsel said, louder this time, his eyes drilling into Gregory like they were chiseling a headstone. The room cracked then, something subtle, like the first splinter in a dam. The COO leaned back, lips pressed in a line. 2 board members began flipping through the revised contract. One muttered something under his breath. Another stood and walked to the window, staring out like he might leap. No one spoke for a full minute. Then the buyer's lead negotiator looked to me and said, "We'll need 48 hours, but consider this a handshake." I nodded, stood, didn't look at Gregory again. I'd done my part. Anna would handle the rest. It hit the wire on a Tuesday morning, sandwiched between some forgettable IPO chatter and a puff piece about eco-friendly startup socks. But the headline made me pause mid-sip. Leadership restructuring and strategic repositioning. Legacy Enterprises appoints new chair. The press release was surgical. Gregory had stepped aside to pursue new opportunities in the private advisory sector, which we all know is PR code for fired with a non-disclosure and a check fat enough to keep his mouth shut. 3 board members announced early retirement, citing a desire to focus on family and philanthropic work. Another simply disappeared from the website entirely. No goodbye post, not even a bio freeze, just gone. And there she was, Anna M.H., chair of the board. No headshot yet, no interviews, just a name and a title on a page with more weight than any resume ever printed. Her first act? Dismantling the ghost tower brick by brick. Departments realigned, projects reevaluated, compensation audits launched. I read somewhere that she personally called 3 junior analysts who'd been passed over for promotions the past 2 years, said they were being reassessed, said their work hadn't gone unnoticed. She didn't post about it, didn't tweet some new girl boss mantra. She just did the work, quiet, sharp, like a scalpel carving rot from bone. A week later, the buyer closed the deal under the new terms. Clean, legal, transparent. The $20 million hit the trust account. Anna declined to comment for the press. I smiled when I read that. Classic her. As for me, I updated my LinkedIn. Strategic advisor to Legacy Enterprises. Counsel to founding successor. No hashtags, no victory laps, just the truth in 12 words. I set up a new office in a low-rise building off a quiet street, walls still smelling like fresh paint. Kept it simple. 1 desk, 1 bookshelf, and behind me, framed in glass, mounted with care, was the envelope. Still sealed in the replica we'd made. The real one had done its job. Visitors glance at it sometimes, ask what it is. I just say, that was the moment they lost their grip. They laugh, thinking it's a metaphor. It's not. Because that envelope, ignored, dismissed, buried in a drawer for 5 years, did what no rant, lawsuit, or resignation letter ever could. It turned silence into leverage, absence into presence, a whisper into a wrecking ball. They thought I left quietly, but the silence was part of the plan.